Readers of Reddit, which is the darkest novel have you ever read? Story 1. It's not dark in a gory or taboo kind of way, but Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad really excels in portraying what happens to a human mind exposed to nothing but violence, discrimination, and lawlessness in a completely foreign setting. It's quite harrowing to follow Marlowe as he follows Kurtz into the colonial Congo jungle, only to find the latter as a self-defined god among the natives, and acting out his command with gruesome nonchalance. The apocalyptic feeling of the mind is really present in the last quarter of the book, and you're almost holding your breath yourself until he makes it out of there eventually. Story 2. Haunted is a novel made up of stories, 23 of the most horrifying, hilarious, mind-blowing, stomach-churning tales you'll ever encounter. The stories are told by people who have all answered an ad headlined Artist's Retreat, abandon your life for 3 months. They are led to believe that here they will leave behind all the distractions of real life that are keeping them from creating the masterpiece that is in them. But here turns out to be a cavernous and ornate old theater where they are utterly isolated from the outside world, and where heat and power, and most importantly, food, are in increasingly short supply. And the more desperate the circumstances become, the more desperate the stories they tell, and the more devious their machinations to make themselves the hero of the inevitable play slash movie slash nonfiction blockbuster that will certainly be made from their plight. Story 2. Living Dead Girl. Once upon a time, I was a little girl who disappeared. Once upon a time, my name was not Alice. Once upon a time, I didn't know how lucky I was. When Alice was 10, Ray took her away from her family, her friends, her life. She learned to give up all power, to endure all pain. She waited for the nightmare to be over. Now Alice is 15 and Ray still has her, but he speaks more and more of her death. He does not know it is what she longs for. She does not know he has something more terrifying than death in mind for her. This is Alice's story. It is one you have never heard, and one you will never, ever forget. Story 3. Exquisite Corpse. To serial slayer Andrew Compton, murder is an art, the most intimate art. After feigning his own death to escape from prison, Compton makes his way to the United States with the sole ambition of bringing his art to new heights. Tormented by his own perverse desires and drawn to possess and destroy young boys, Compton inadvertently joins forces with Jay Byrne, a dissolute playboy who has pushed his art to limits even Compton hadn't previously imagined. Together, Compton and Byrne set their sights on an exquisite young Vietnamese-American runaway, Tran, whom they deem to be the perfect victim. Swiftly moving from the grimy streets of London's Piccadilly Circus to the decadence of the New Orleans French Quarter, and punctuated by rants from radio talk show host Lush Rimbaud, aka Luke Ransom, Tran's ex-lover, who is dying of AIDS and who intends to wreak ultimate havoc before leaving this world. Exquisite Corpse unfolds into a labyrinth of murder and love. Ultimately, all four characters converge on a singular bloody night after which their lives will be irrevocably changed or terminated. Poppy Z. Bright dissects the landscape of torment and invites us into the mind of a slayer. Exquisite Corpse confirms Brecht as a writer who defies categorization. It is a novel for those who dare trespass, where the sacred and profane become one. Story 4. The Slob. Some stains don't come out. Raised in a household that was so filthy it was stomach spilling, Vera has become a neat freak. Her obsession with cleanliness sprouts the concept that her skills can be put to use in a unique way. In an effort to generate some income for her and her disabled husband, Daniel, just prior to the birth of their first child, she takes aim at the booming door-to-door sales business of the late 80s. All is going well until she arrives at the steps of a house she wished she never had. The steps of an evil that brings back the ghastly memories she so desperately tried to wash away. Nothing will prepare you for the nastiness, disorder, and uncleansable horror brought forth by the Slob. Story 5. Am I Beautiful? Adam Miller, a successful marketing manager at a travel agency, visits Tokyo, Japan on business. During his trip, he has a one-night stand with a young Japanese woman, Miki Someya. But Miki latches onto him. She follows him, stalks him through the streets of Tokyo, professing her love and begging for his. Adam manages to avoid her, but he loses control of himself when she confronts him and threatens to follow him home to tell his wife about their affair. In a fit of drunken rage, Adam attacks her. Then he carves a smile on her face with a pair of shears. Afraid and ashamed, he flees the country and escapes prosecution. But years later, when children start vanishing in his city and the only suspect is a woman with a scarred face, he suspects his past has followed him home. Inspired by a classic urban legend, John Athan, the author of Lovesick and Maneater, brings you a disturbing new vision of a barbarous romance. Story 6. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea. There is a scene in the first half of the book that is very beautifully written, as is the entire book, but also profoundly disturbing. The whole book is phenomenal, though. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea tells the tale of a band of savage 13-year-old boys who reject the adult world as illusory, hypocritical, and sentimental, and train themselves in a brutal callousness they call objectivity. When the mother of one of them begins an affair with a ship's officer, he and his friends idealize the man at first. But it is not long before they conclude that he is in fact soft and romantic. They regard their disappointment in him as an act of betrayal on his part and react violently. Story 7. Best served cold. Springtime in Styria, and that means war. Springtime in Styria, and that means revenge. There have been 19 years of blood. The ruthless Grand Duke Orso is locked in a vicious struggle with the squabbling League of Eight, and between them they have bled the land white. While armies march, heads roll, and cities burn, behind the scenes, bankers, priests, and older, darker powers play a deadly game to choose who will be king. War may be hell, but for Monza Mercado, the Snake of Talons, the most feared and famous mercenary in Duke Orso's employ, it's a damn good way of making money, too. Her victories have made her popular, a shade too popular for her employer's taste. Betrayed, thrown down a mountain, and left for dead. Mercado's rewards is a broken body and a burning hunger for vengeance. Whatever the cost, 7 men must die. Her allies include Styria's least reliable drunkard, Styria's most treacherous poisoner, a mass murderer obsessed with numbers, and a Northman who just wants to do the right thing. Her enemies number the better half of the nation. And that's all before the most dangerous man in the world is dispatched to hunt her down and finish the job Duke Orso started. Springtime in Styria. And that means revenge. Story 8. Children of Blood and Bone. They ended my mother. They took our magic. They tried to bury us. Now we rise. Zélie Adebola remembers when the soil of Orsha hummed with magic. Burners ignited flames, tiders beckoned waves, and Zélie's Reaper mother summoned forth souls. But everything changed the night magic disappeared. Under the orders of a ruthless king, Magi perished, leaving Zélie without a mother and her people without hope. Now, Zélie has one chance to bring back magic and strike against the monarchy. With the help of a rogue princess, Zélie must outwit and outrun the crown prince, who is hell-bent on eradicating magic for good. Danger lurks in Orisha, where snow leopard prowls and vengeful spirits wait in the waters. Yet the greatest danger may be Zélie herself, as she struggles to control her powers and her growing feelings for an enemy. Story 9. Nightmare Alley. Nightmare Alley begins with an extraordinary description of a carnival show geek, alcoholic and abject, and the object of the voyeuristic crowd's gleeful disgust and derision. Going about his work at a county fair, young Stan Carlyle is working as a carny, and he wonders how a man could fall so low. There's no way in hell, he vows, that anything like that will ever happen to him. And since Stan is clever and ambitious and not without a useful streak of ruthlessness, soon enough he's going places. On stage, he plays the mentalist with a cute assistant, before long his harried wife. Then he graduates to full-blown spiritualist, catering to the needs of the rich and gullible in their well-upholstered homes. It looks like the world is Stan's for the taking, at least for now. Story 10. The Butterfly Garden. Near an isolated mansion lies a beautiful garden. In this garden grow luscious flowers, shady trees, and a collection of precious butterflies, young women who have been kidnapped and intricately tattooed to resemble their namesakes. Overseeing it all is the gardener, a brutal, twisted man obsessed with capturing and preserving his lovely specimens. When the garden is discovered, a survivor is brought in for questioning. FBI agents Victor Hanoverian and Brandon Edison are tasked with piecing together one of the most stomach-churning cases of their careers. But the girl, known only as Maya, proves to be a puzzle herself. As her story twists and turns, slowly shedding light on life in the butterfly garden, Maya reveals old grudges, new saviors, and horrific tales of a man who'd go to any length to hold beauty captive. But the more she shares, the more the agents have to wonder what she's still hiding. Story 11. The God Engines. Captain Ian Tiffey is a man of faith, whose allegiance to his lord and to his ship is uncontested. The bishopry militant knows this. And so, when it needs a ship and crew to undertake a secret, sacred mission to a hidden land, Tiffey is the captain to whom the task is given. Tiffey knows from the start that his mission will be a test of his skill as a leader of men and as a devout follower of his God. It's what he doesn't know that matters, to what ends his faith and his ship will ultimately be put, and that the tests he will face will come not only from his God and the bishopry militant, but from another, more malevolent source entirely. Story 12. The Bunker Diary. I can't believe I fell for it. It was still dark when I woke up this morning. As soon as my eyes opened, I knew where I was. A low-ceilinged, rectangular building made entirely of whitewashed concrete. There are 6 little rooms along the main corridor. There are no windows, no doors. The elevator is the only way in or out. What's he going to do to me? What am I going to do? People are really quite simple, and they have simple needs. Food, water, light, space, privacy, maybe a small measure of dignity, a bit of freedom. What happens when someone simply takes all that away? Story 13. Say Nothing. A true story of assassination and memory in Northern Ireland. In December 1972, Jean McConville, a 38-year-old mother of 10, was dragged from her Belfast home by masked intruders, her children clinging to her legs. They never saw her again. Her abduction was one of the most notorious episodes of the vicious conflict known as the Troubles. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the IRA was responsible, but in a climate of fear and paranoia, no one would speak of it. In 2003, 5 years after an accord brought an uneasy peace to Northern Ireland, a set of human bones was discovered on a beach. McConville's children knew it was their mother when they were told a blue safety pin was attached to the dress. With so many kids, she had always kept it handy for diapers or ripped clothes. Patrick Radden Keefe's mesmerizing book on the bitter conflict in Northern Ireland and its aftermath uses the McConville case as a starting point for the tale of a society racked by a violent guerrilla war, a war whose consequences have never been reckoned with. The brutal violence seared not only people like the McConville children, but also IRA members embittered by a peace that fell far short of the goal of a united Ireland, and left them wondering whether the endings they committed were not justified acts of war, but simple murders. Patrick Radden Keefe writes an intricate narrative about a notorious slaying in Northern Ireland and its devastating repercussions. Story 14. A Child Called It by Dave Pelzer. I remember reading this book when I was in elementary school, probably when I was around 10 years old or so, or younger. It seems the book was published in 1995, and I remember reading it when there was a bunch of buzz about it. It was supremely disturbing, especially because I was the age that the author had been in some of his recollections. I feel as if reading that book was formative to me. A lot can be said about being exposed to ideas, good or bad, that you will not encounter in your own life at an early age. It definitely made me much more empathetic. Story 15. Going to be for real, it was a fan fiction on AO3. This wasn't even meant to be a horror. It was meant to be this mermaid AU and celebration of mermaid. And I was bored. It looked super popular, so I read it. Holy crap. This romance turned into the reader being forcibly turned into a mermaid sea creature thing in the name of love, being stuck in some cryptic enclosure with the same sea creatures who then forced her to have their kids. But then it didn't work out. Since the body was still a human body, then a whole lot of other crap happened, but I didn't read the rest since it was just a really messed up love story. Like, I only found it dark because of the fact that the writer honestly meant this to be a romance and not horrific at all. And reading what they thought was so lovely actually be crimes and very traumatizing if that was a real life situation. Story 16, The Warriors by Sol Uric. It's the basis for the 1979 cult film by Walter Hill, but it's different in pretty much every conceivable way. It takes place in the 60s. The name of the gang is different. The Coney Island Dominators instead of the Warriors. The ages are different with them being from 14 to 17 in the book, and the characters are different in terms of the names, but are analogous to the film versions. What's different is how the book handles violence, whereas the film is an action flick parodying, for lack of a better term, the 70s blaxploitation and kung fu craze. The novel's far bleaker. In its depiction of realistic violence, as well as social themes and structures surrounding why children of the era join gangs such as them being from broken homes and from welfare dependent families. One scene that got to me, though, that was revised for the film, is when the warriors meet Mercy, the female lead. It goes the same way as it does in the movie. They meet a rival gang, the Borinquen Blazers in the book, orphans in the film, and ask for safe passage before a girl Mercy shows up and messes it all up. Whereas in the movie, she joins the gang for the rest of the adventure of the film, her book counterpart gets it far worse. Story says 17, either Unwind or 1984. 1984 includes scenes of torment, while Unwind is almost darker. It features a scene where the antagonist has every part of him surgically removed, but the entire chapter is from his point of view as he is completely conscious for the entire operation. It also features the main characters having parents who care for them so little that they would willingly subject their children to the procedure rather than continue to take care of them until they're 18. Keep in mind, this is a young adult novel. If it wasn't, I'm sure they'd have been even more graphic. Story 18. This might be a hot take because it probably isn't the darkest thing I've read content wise, and it isn't one book, but the Animorphs, LOL. I read them very young, and to this day, the concept of a slug like alien that crawls into your ear, wraps itself around your brain, and uses you as a tool against your friends and family to further an invasion no one else knows is happening is, I can't think about it too long, levels of terrifying. Then, to make it worse, it has to leave your body to feed every 3 days. So you get this tiny moment of freedom, albeit strapped down and guarded, knowing that Yerk is about to crawl back inside you and trap you again. Oh my god. And then imagine it tricks a family member, so they end up with a Yerk too, and you just have to watch helplessly from inside? Ugh. I'm pretty sure my age when I read these has a fair bit to do with why it made such a lasting impression on me, but still. Story 19. There are a few that I can think of that would try to claim that title in different ways. American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis for the bleakness of the human soul, the over the top violence, the complete lack of morality. Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy for the unrelenting cruelty and the sheer force of will. Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Basterrica for the industrialization of the human body and for the depths to which we'll succumb to feel connected, to care for those we love. 2066 by Roberto Bolano for the way it shows the real and true terrors in the world, which we are completely unaware of and sometimes actively ignore. My work is not yet done by Thomas Ligotti for the complete and utter lack of hope. These are the ones that have haunted me, that have stuck in my brain over the years the most. Story 20. I'm sure there are stories that are darker as a whole from front to back, but I really felt the ending of Penpal was bleak as all hell and really stuck with me for a while. It ends on a note that gives you and the characters all the answers you and they need, but none of the answers they want. We learn how these events are connected. We learn what happened in the end, but we never learn why. We are left with really uncomfortable questions that we probably don't want the answers to, and both reader and main character are just left to ponder on them forever. And of course, because the events of the story take place well before the time the narrator is actually recounting it, there really is absolutely no catharsis or resolution for anyone. Everything in the story happened and finished like a decade prior. There's no closure to be found, no justice to be gained, no revelation to shed light on the reasons. It just ends on the worst event of a whole series of progressively worse events. And the main character is left to just know that happened, but that there's nothing to be changed and no new information to be found. It's bleak and dark in a very personal way. The world will continue as normal, but these characters' lives and their relationships will never fully heal, if they heal at all. Story 21. One of the darkest books I've read is The Painted Bird by Jerzy Kosinski. It's this brutal, almost surreal exploration of human cruelty during World War II. The protagonist, a young boy, wanders through Eastern Europe, witnessing and experiencing some of the most harrowing acts of violence and depravity. What makes it particularly dark isn't just the events, but the way the narrative immerses you into this bleak, unforgiving world where innocence is continually shattered. It's not an easy read by any means, but if you're looking for something that delves into the depths of human darkness, this one leaves a lasting impact. Story 22. The only nonfiction book to seriously creep me out is Helter Skelter, an account of the Charles Manson cult as told by the prosecutor of the court case. It's full of details that only an insider would know, and it captures how far gone the young women were. There's an early part where one of the girls is in jail and starts giggling and telling her cellmate how she would go creeping, essentially breaking and entering houses as a kind of rehearsal for the later murders. That has stayed with me for years. Story 23. The Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. Seems like a Hunger Games and Divergent-esque YA series about a sci-fi dystopian future where people are sorted into categories. Ends up a lot less like the Hunger Games and more like Brave New World. There's the usual disturbing, scary content you might expect in sci-fi. Gore, torment, SA, harm to children, horrifying eldritch space shit, etc. However, what makes the series really deeply disturbing to me is the world building and the setting, as well as an incredibly realistic and chilling plotline regarding a young man's slow, traumatizing descent into fascism. I can't say much more without spoilers, but yeah, check it out. Story 24. For entirely different reasons, A Voyage to Arcturus by David Lindsay and Descent into Hell by Charles Williams. Voyage to Arcturus sucked me into a world totally antithetical to what I know and believe, toppling theme after theme and leaving only diabolical bodilessness. Afterwards, my head was spinning. I felt I had to remember what truth was and defend physical reality itself. Descent into Hell felt like peeling back the veil over ordinary relationships and mundane evils and goods, discovering spiritual horrors and the terrible importance of things. And the horrors are crushing, dreamlike, sickening.